Hey guys, welcome back. This is Samir. If you haven't seen the last video, what we did there was set up our dev environment, install a couple of dependencies to be able to write tests against our Firebase trigger functions using the Jest library. Firebase trigger functions basically are functions that fire up or react to database events, whether it was the Firestore database or your real-time database. So I've done a bit of housekeeping between recording videos, and that's to save your time. I didn't want to make this video too long, and I wanted to get to the part which we all want to see, which is how to write these tests using Jest. So I've gone ahead and installed a few dependencies that we're going to need, mainly Jest. And note that this is version 25, and the reason we're installing Jest 25, not the latest version, is because we are using Node 8 in this project, as I explained in the last video. However, it's worth mentioning that Firebase is going to move to deprecate depending on Node 8 and to move to Node 10 eventually. Another dependency that we're going to need, Firebase Testing. It's another useful package that we're going to be utilizing in our tests, and types, Jest, which is going to help VS Code give us IntelliSense and code completion, which is very handy and makes your coding a lot easier. So just to save your time, you can go ahead and use this command npm install dependency Jest latest version 25, and this package Firebase Testing and types Jest. Once that's done, double check that it's all in your div dependencies in package.json. And of course, before installing that, make sure that you're cd'd into your functions folder, because that's where your package.json lives. Okay, so once we have that out of the way, let's go ahead and set up our folder structure. And the way I want to do this is I want to set up a folder inside my functions folder called source. And in src, I want to make another folder called __ tests _. And in there, we're going to be writing our test files. And let's go ahead and create one right now. And I'm going to call it first.test.js. And Jest is pretty flexible with your naming. You could call this spec. A lot of people like to call them specs or tests. This could be JS or TS, depending on which language you have chosen to work with. However, as I mentioned in the last video, we're going to be using JavaScript, just plain JavaScript for this. Later on, I'm going to be putting my Cloud Function code in different modules inside the source folder, and then I'm gonna require them in this index.js. You don't have to worry about this right now. We're gonna do this later. So right now, if we go to our test file and just try to type in any of the methods that Jest offers, things like, for example, test, you'll find that these suggestions are not quite correct. So VS Code is not picking up on these suggestions, and that is the reason we installed that package types Jest. So to make your coding experience a bit more pleasant, we want to set up VS Code to be able to provide that IntelliSense and the code completion features. So we do that by creating an empty file called jsconfig.json inside our functions folder, and we put in these parameters: type acquisition, include Jest, and this automatically tells VS Code to look for these types and to give suggestions based on it. Another thing we want to do is configure Jest. Make sure that this file is sitting in your functions folder. I don't want to take all the time typing all of this, so I'm just going to make this available to you guys. Test regex, this is the way to tell Jest basically how to look for your test files. So anything that lives in a tests folder, _tests, _, or whatever you call your folder, and then that has the middle section saying test or spec. Spec is another word people tend to use for test files. Ignore patterns. I guess this has to be patterns, I'm sorry, yeah. Ignore patterns. And library node modules, basically we're telling Jest not to look for any files inside these folders. Module file extensions, so ending with JS, TS, TSX, JSX, JSON node. And you want to include all of these because if you're importing modules from NPM and in your node code, basically in your JavaScript code that has any of these extensions, you want just to be able to import it and to process that extension. So don't leave out these, even if you're not using TS, if you're not using JSX files, just leave it there, because we're going to be importing Firebase modules into our test file, as you're going to see in a bit, and these do have these extensions. Test environment, node, and root directory. As I said, we're creating a folder, source, inside our functions folder, where all our code is going to live. So you want to point just towards that direction, and you want to tell Just that your code is going to be inside source, and then it's going to go ahead and look for these files. So one more thing you want to do is you want to add this test command to your scripts in your package.json file. And what this does is whenever we run npm test inside our functions folder, it's gonna ask Jest to run with the watch all command, and this tells Jest that whatever matches the criteria that we just defined in our Jest configuration file, Jest is gonna keep watching these files, and whenever changes are saved, it's just going to rerun itself and continuously display your test results, and that's going to make your experience working with Jest a lot more pleasant. So go ahead and add this, and then save your file, save your package.json file, and close it. Now what you want to do next is let's go ahead and create our first test file, and that's going to live inside our source/test folder, whatever we called it, whatever we defined it to be in our Jest configuration file. And I called my file Jest, I called it first.test.js. Just to verify that everything is working, let's go ahead and run our test command that we just defined in our package.json file and see if Jest is actually firing up. So if we do npm test, you're going to see that yes, Jest is running, and it did detect our first.test.js file. However, it does return an error because we have nothing written in that file. So to verify that that's working too, let's write our first test to return a success. So we're just going to define a test, and as you can see, VS Code already recognizes the different methods that Jest offers, things like it, test, describe. You can see that we're getting IntelliSense suggestions, and it does display tooltips on how these methods actually work. So let's write a simple test for now just to verify that Jest is running in watch mode, that this is going to reload, and that it's asserting these tests properly. A simple test could be test should be 1, and then we're going to pass in an arrow function. In this function we're going to say expect. Expect is one of the methods that Jest offers, and we're going to put in a value in here. This could be something that a function returns, this could be something that a promise returns, and I'm going to show you how we're going to work with expect and how we're going to assert the results in order to have these tests return positive or success or failures. So for now, just something simple would be expect 1 to be, and then 1, and yes, 1, we expect 1 to be 1, and if this does evaluate to true, this test should succeed. If it does not, then it's going to return a failure, and Jest is going to show us where this failure is. So if I just save that, Control S, then we're going to see that this reruns, and we get 1 passed out of 1 total test, and you can see a little check mark here saying should be 1, and it's a success. So if I change this to 3, 1 is not 3, this, and save it, we're going to run the test again, and we see that there is a failure. It says expected 3, we received 1 instead. So Jest is working, and now we can move on to the more exciting part. So before writing any tests for Firebase functions, what we want to do is let's split our terminals. So basically we want to run 2 terminals side by side, and why I want to do that is because I want Jest running in this side so I can see my test results, and in here I want to go ahead and fire up the emulators that Firebase offers. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to cd to the root folder. This is the root folder of the entire project, not the functions folder, and then I want to run Firebase emulators start, and I want to start both the functions emulator and the Firestore emulator because I need to access my database. I'm going to need to write or update or delete docs from my database, and then I'm going to want the functions emulator to basically react based on the functions that I'm going to write to whatever changes my tests are going to be making to the database, and to do certain effects or certain side effects on it, which I want to assert the results of later on. So we're going to run both emulators. Let's go ahead and hit enter here and wait for these emulators to start working. So here we're getting starting functions and Firestore. With that running, as you can see, we have both command lines running side by side. These could be 2 terminal windows outside of VS Code. It's up to you how you want to do this. I find this very convenient, so I'm just going to do this here. So first of all, what I want to import is I want to import Firebase, but the instance of Firebase that I'm going to instantiate here is going to be the package that we just installed, which is Firebase Testing. And what this, sorry, it's not important. So this is going to be const Firebase. And this module exports several methods that are going to be very useful for us during testing, as you can see here. And mostly we're going to be using the clear Firestore data method, which enables us to clear the entire database between test runs, which is a very good practice because you don't want the a certain test to spill over into your second test, and so on and so forth. There are other methods. Go ahead and look at it. Initialize test app. We're not going to be using this because we're going to be initializing an admin app. using the admin module that Firebase has already pre-installed on as a dependency. So we're going to say const admin equals require, and in here we're going to say Firebase admin, and that's the module. After that, what we want to do, and yeah, one more thing, guys, you want this to be at the very top, to be the top guy. Okay, otherwise you're going to run into issues when you try to execute this code or when your test is running. It has to do with certain with initializing certain variables and whatnot. So just, I don't want to get into it now. Just make sure this is at the very top of your file. Next, what we want to do is we want to instantiate a few variables. So I'm just going to copy this and explain it in our code. So in here, what we want to do is define a variable that's going to hold our project ID, and this has to be identical to the project ID that your project has. You could get that from your web console, or you could find it in this Firebase RC file. Just copy and paste it and put it in here. Then we're gonna also define a few environment variables that are going to be made available whenever this code is being executed. So we're going to pass in project ID to this environment variable gcloud project, Firestore emulator host. We're going to point it at localhost 8080, and this is the port and the address of the Firestore emulator that we have just fired up. So make sure that this is identical to this. If the port was different here, go ahead and update this to match it. Next, we're gonna let app, we're gonna define a variable app to an instance of admin.initialize app, and what this is gonna do is gonna return an instance of app initialized in admin mode, and that's gonna help us bypass any permissions that we may require to write or update or delete from the database. We're not gonna be needing these permissions because we are testing cases that have to do with trigger functions, which generally run in your backend, which is a secure and authenticated environment. So this is why we're initializing in admin mode. And then we're gonna initialize a Firestore instance, and that's gonna be by calling Firebase, which is this testing package dot Firestore, and passing in an instance of app, which is initialized in admin. So let's save that and see what kind of errors we're gonna get. So no errors with importing any of these modules, no errors with initializing these variables. The error that we got here has to do with having no test in the file, and just always expects there to be one test function at least. And in this case, we have deleted the test function that we had before, so this is nothing to worry about for now. All right, so this is the fun part. Let's start writing our test. So what I want to do is, before running any tests, I want to tell Jest to run a function to clear all the database data before every instance or before every testing procedure. And how I'm going to do this is I'm going to say before all, and I'm going to pass in a function here that does something. And there is a method that Firebase Testing provides, which is called clear database, clear Firestore data or whatever, and that returns a promise. So we're going to use the async await way of doing things, and we're going to say await Firebase dot clear Firestore data, and this is a function, so we're going to put the parentheses, and that's it. So before saving this file, we're going to need to do a few more things. So here we forgot to pass the project ID variable. We have to wrap it in an object, and we're going to do the same thing when calling the clear Firestore method. We're going to have to pass in this parameter to tell Firebase Testing how or which database to be clearing exactly. So now if we save this, we're not getting an error from here. This is just due to not having any actual test. So let's just write a mock test here, and that's going to say should be true. And we're going to let me just do this real quick. Expect 1 to be 1. Save that and let's run it. And we got an error. So okay, so this is not very helpful. Yeah, so alright, so I think this has to do with our project ID. Yes, I did warn you guys that this has to be identical to the actual project ID. And here we have these in camel case. These are actually all in small letters. I should have copied and pasted it just like I told you guys. Yeah, there you go. So once that's fixed, we have no problem this is working properly. So we know that the instance of Firebase Testing that we've initialized, we have access to Firebase admin, and we have initialized Firestore through this Firebase module, and we are getting no errors right now. So this is all good. Let's go ahead and write our first test. And here's an example test. So what I expect is my functions to be triggered by a document written to whatever document that goes to test collection. So whenever a document is written to this path, trigger function to copy it to, let's say, copies, and to have the same document ID. So what I want to test is that my trigger functions are basically taking a copy of whatever document being written to this path, which is test collection, and whatever document is being written here, and to make a copy of that exact document into another collection called copies with the same document ID. So let's go ahead and write our test. So we're going to say a test, and this should expect to find a copy in copies collection. Okay, and then I'm going to pass in an async function because Firebase is going to be returning promises, and I want to use the async await syntax. So what I want to do first is create a test doc variable. I'm going to say const test doc, and I'm going to create an object here, name, for example, Samir, age, I say 21, and city Riyadh. Okay, so we have our test doc. Now we want to create a reference to where we want to be writing this document, and we're going to say const ref equals this instance of db, which we defined up here, db.collection. We're going to point to test collection, which is where we expect the trigger functions to actually get triggered once a document is written to. So .doc, and we're gonna leave this empty. This way Firebase is gonna create a random UID for this document when something is written to it. Next we're gonna say await, because the actual set method returns a promise. So we're gonna wait for that promise to resolve. We're gonna say await ref.set, and we're gonna pass in the test doc object that we created up here. And for now, that's going to be it. Let's see if this works. I'm just going to write a little test here. So let's just expect 1 to be 1 as we did before, and save this. So if all of this runs fine, we should expect no errors, and this should return passed. So this test doesn't tell us anything yet. All this is doing is just doing something and then expecting 1 to be 1. So this is why it's passing. It's not telling us if a copy has been made as we expect this test to actually evaluate. It's not telling us anything useful right now, but we are just verifying that writing to the database, the local emulator is not throwing any errors. And let's go ahead. I think this is a good opportunity to take a look at that UI that Firebase is now offering as part of its Firebase tools. So let's take a look at the Firestore UI, which is going to run in a web browser. And we should expect to find that document that we just wrote. And as expected, yes, it did create a test collection because this collection was not existent before we attempted to write this document. So it went ahead and created it automatically. It did create a new document with a random UID, and here's our data that we just passed in. So we know that this is working. Let's just keep this minimized for now and go ahead and write our actual test. So as we commented here, what we expect to evaluate is to find a copy of this document in another collection called copies. So let's write that test. Let's create a copyref variable and point that to db.collection copies. Okay. Now, what we're going to need from this write operation is to return the ID of the document that we wrote, and we don't know what that is, so because it's a random ID that was generated upon the write. So what we're going to do is we're going to say ref.id, and this is how you could access that. Now we're going to keep that in const copy ID equals ref.id, and I'm sorry, I don't think that is a property, it's not a method, so no parentheses here. And copy ref db.collection, we're going to point that to this doc, which has the ID copy ID. So now we have the reference to it. What we're going to do is we're going to go and read what's in there. So we want to say copy ref dot get, and we're going to save that. We're going to put that in a constant called copy document. Then a copy document. I'm sorry, I'm very messy today, guys. And we're going to put in an await here because this returns a promise. So once that's resolved, the code is going to continue executing. And here's what's going to happen, guys. Most probably what's going to happen is that once we try to evaluate what's in the copy doc, it's going to be undefined. And the reason that's going to happen is because this code is going to run sequentially. It is going to stop at these awaits until these promises are resolved. But what's happening here is that the trigger function, once we write it, it's not going to be fast enough to trigger before this operation is done. So this is going to ask Firestore to return an instance of this document, and Firestore by that time is not going to have a copy just yet, so it's just going to return undefined. And once we try to run our test and assert the result, it's going to fail. So this is what I want to show you how to work around today. For now, let's continue writing our test, and we expect copy doc dot data. This is how we access the actual document, to strictly equal our test doc, which is this object here. Now if we save this, we expect it to fail, and we want that to happen. We want it to fail because what we want to do is we want our test to keep failing until we write enough code to get it to work. But as I said, this is not only going to fail because the triggers are not working properly, it's because we have a race condition here. When we're writing that document, we expect the trigger functions to fire and to make a copy, and that takes time. However, our test code is still running, and it's not going to be waiting for that. So what we want to do is we want to manually have our code pause to wait for that to happen. Now, the approach that I'm going to be following in this video is a very naive approach. We're just going to have our code wait for some time. So we're going to do a timeout. However, I do have a different method that I use when I'm working on my own projects, which basically rely on attaching a listener to the document that we expect to read. And we only return a value once that listener detects a change in that reference, or if a timeout actually takes place. And I usually put that around 3 or 4 seconds just to give the Firestore some time to do its business. So that usually happens within half a second, but if it fails, it's just going to gracefully fail and say that it timed out. And if it detects any changes in, let's say, 50 milliseconds or 100 milliseconds, it just returns the result, and then I can assert based on that. That's going to be a topic for another video. If I have time, I'm going to go ahead and post that as a follow-up to this one. But for now, let's just follow the naive approach. So let me move on now to writing the trigger function that's actually going to make this copy to the collection that we expect it to be in, which is copies collection. Let's go to our source folder, and I'm going to create a new file here called test collection triggers. And this is going to be dedicated to functions that are going to react to anything being written in the test collection. Okay. And then I'm going to save this, and in index, I'm going to require that file. So I'm going to say const test collection triggers equals required this, and then I'm going to say module.exports test collection triggers. So once Firebase command tool compiles this code, instead of finding my functions in here, it's just going to look up all these exports which point to these files, and it's just going to compile that code. It's a more organized way to basically split your code if you're working on a bigger project. Otherwise, you can just go ahead and write your code directly in the index.js file. Let's save this. So we're getting an error now. And the reason is it says we are unable to load your functions code, and that is because we have no exports in our actual test collections file. So let's make our first exports dot, and we're going to call that function onCreate. Okay, so let's just call it that, onCreate. And that's going to equal to functions.firestore. This comes from here, and this takes a .firestore and .document, and we're gonna pass in a reference here, and that reference is gonna be a test collection, which is the path that we want to observe for document creations. And we're just gonna say doc ID, so whatever document is written there, I want you to react to it. So to do that, we're gonna call the onCreate method whenever a document is created at this path. So in here, we're gonna again use the async syntax and pass in a function, an arrow function, and this function takes in a couple of parameters, but we're gonna need the snapshot parameter only to access the data that's being written to that document. So we're gonna firstly define a constant called data snapshot.data. This is a method that you need to call, and that's it. So now what we want to do is we want to write a copy of this document. So whenever a document is being written to this path, I want you to call this function, and I want you to copy the content of that document, which comes in this snapshot, into my data variable, and then I want you to create a new document in a different path. So now that we want to interact with the database from our functions, we're going to need to require the admin module. So that's going to be done by requiring Firebase admin, and we're going to initialize the app from here, and we're going to say const db equals admin dot firestore, which is going to give us access to the Firestore in admin credentials. So first of all, we want to define a reference called copy reference, which equals db.collection, and that copy should live in a collection called copies, as we defined it here. Say doc, and the ID should be identical to the document that was written to test collection. So we're going to get the ID here by saying const doc ID equals snapshot dot ID, which is a property. So now we're going to pass this in here, and then next we're going to go await copyref dot set, and what you want to pass in there is the same snapshot data that we got from the original document. So that's going to be data, and that's it. So let's save and back to our index to require this file properly. Yes, this is, I'm sorry guys, it's just working with different frameworks and different languages always gets me confused. So what we want to do is we want to add this test collections triggers to our exports by saying exports dot test collection triggers, and this should equal this. So we're adding this to our exports.test collection triggers and save. So now this should reload without an error. So as you can see now, functions initialized properly, there's no problem here. So now if we rerun our test, we expect a copy to be made. Before I do that, let's just take a second and try that UI and see if the function we just wrote does work. And that's not the right way to do it, guys. You don't want to go and manually verify every test, but I'm just interested to see how the UI reacts to this. So Firestore, let's follow this link. All right, so what's gonna happen based on the function that we just wrote? We expect to get a copy of whatever document we write in test collection. So let's just go ahead and create this random copy, and I'm just gonna give it an ID of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and it's gonna have name John. Save. So now we did create this document. What we expect is a new collection to pop up here with the name copies and to find this exact document in there. So let's go ahead and just reload this, and it does work. So now we have copies in here, and in copies we have an identical document with the same ID. And this could be anything. You could have a different ID, you could modify it. This is up to you. This is all based on the design that you're trying to achieve, but this is the case that I'm trying to demonstrate to you guys here. So this works. Now let's rerun our test. So what our test is trying to assert is to verify that a copy was actually made. My guess is that if I rerun this test, it's gonna fail. And it does fail. And the reason this happens is, as I said before, it's a race condition. So this test runs faster than the Firebase reacts, or then the functions react to that trigger. And therefore, when we try to read the document at the test reference, what we get is undefined, instead of getting a document that's identical to the one that we wrote. So what we want to do here is to artificially delay the execution of our code before getting this document from the database. And we're going to do this by using promises in a clever way to delay the execution of our code. And to do this, we can await for our promise to be returned, and we're going to create a new promise which has a timeout function basically, and we're going to set an arbitrary value, say 2000 milliseconds, which should be more than enough for our trigger to actually run the code and to make that copy. This is 4000 milliseconds. Let's start with 4000 milliseconds and save. So now what's going to happen is you're going to see that this is going to take a bit more time because it is pausing for 4000 milliseconds, which is 4 seconds here, before trying to actually read from the database. And once we did that, we do see that the test has actually passed now, because Firebase and the functions emulator had enough time to react to the write that we did in here and to generate that copy. And once we queried that database for the copy, it actually returned the document that we expect to actually get. Alright, so there you have it, guys. This was my naive approach towards being able to test your trigger functions locally on your local emulators without having to deploy your code to the cloud and using the Jest library. As I said, this is a very naive approach since we have to artificially delay the execution of our code while best guessing when our trigger functions will have already executed. So I do have a different approach that's a little bit more accurate, and hopefully I'll have enough time soon to record that video and share that method with you guys. For now, I hope you enjoyed this video and I hope you found it useful in any way. If you did, please hit the like button, leave any comments or questions that you have below the video, and I'll try my best to attend to it as soon as I can. Thank you for watching, guys, and I hope to see you again soon.